Hey guys, Woods Farm here, just back out working on the Scout Car. Just got back from Kenny U-Pole earlier today with some more parts. So we're going to start working on the front drive shaft. I also want to make some custom spring perches so we can get to working on that rear axle. What has to happen is we need to pull the axle and we need to kind of tilt it so that the pinion angle is more in line with the rear drive shaft. I can get spring perches, but with COVID, things are really slow in the mail and they're kind of pricey, so I think I'm just going to make custom ones from scratch. And the other thing we got to work on is there's a lot of welding to be done with the framework for the transfer case and also for the floor structure. A lot of the stuff is just tacked in place, so we need to go back and weld everything solid. So we'll get started on that. First things first, we want to work on that front drive shaft, try to get that sorted out. Another thing we got to work on is figuring out where the master cylinder is going to go. The most obvious position is kind of up in this area, but there's potentially some clearance problems. Another idea is actually to mount it under the floor. So that's something we might work with. I was at Kenny U-Pole today and I looked at a couple different master cylinders out of, I was looking at a Ford Ranger. Really any master cylinder with a brake booster. The brake boosters are quite large, and that's kind of the issue with trying to find enough room to mount it. Worst case scenario, we're going to go just with an unboosted master cylinder. That'll give us a little more leeway to potentially mount it right up in here in this area. So that's something that's going to be coming up too. So this drive shaft, it's a front drive shaft from a 1987 GMC. I pulled that at Kenny U-Pole today. It has this double card end, and it's a spline drive shaft, so I thought maybe I might be able to use it. I've already been to the local scrapyard and I picked up a drive shaft that I thought was going to work, and it turns out probably can't use it. So a little frustrated with all this drive shaft stuff, all the different U-joints, figuring out what fits with what. So I'm actually, I believe this double card end, I'm thinking I might be able to use that for the main drive shaft, potentially scavenge that, and then the remainder of it I think I can use for the rear drive shaft, hopefully. This is what I've got figured out for the front drive shaft. This part of the drive shaft here is, it came with the Scout Car when we bought it. It was one of the parts that they included. This U-joint here, I don't know if this is a 1310, and it seems to fit and match up with the front differential, the yoke on that, so that's good. Obviously we're just dry fitting everything now, but eventually I'll replace this with a brand new U-joint if everything works out. So I've got it coming back into some pipe and then moving back. This is a slip yoke that I think was also part of one of the drive shafts that they sent to us. And what I ended up doing is, instead of ordering, you can get kind of weld-on yokes, but again, everything is taking forever in the mail, so it's not really, it's not time-friendly to order stuff. So that's part of the reason why I'm kind of matching all these parts together. But that said, I had the local machine shop machine this down just a bit so it fits perfectly in this pipe. And we're going to weld that on, and that's a 1330, I believe. And I have a combination U-joint that should allow this yoke to match up with the transfer case. So I'm going to try this. Basically, this is a 1350, and the transfer case is a 1330. Now there's a combination U-joint, but when you look at it, it looks like it's going to kind of have some clearance issues. Obviously the combination or U-joint adapters, they're not going to work in every application. So I'm just going to tack up this drive shaft temporarily, and I am going to install the U-joint. There's no real other way to know if it's going to work, and we'll go from there and see if if the clearances work. So one thing I learned about these drive shafts is they have to be in phase. That means that the yokes need to match up or be aligned. And we just have to be extremely careful and as precise as possible when it comes to putting this together, because it needs to balance. Obviously it's a low-speed vehicle, so it doesn't have to be perfect, but the more balanced it is, the better. So it's a lot of figuring and kind of, I'm going to have to shim it and just figure out and make sure everything fits up. The most complicated part is that, I don't know if you can see that, but the inside diameter of this pipe is not exactly the same as the outside diameter of this pipe. So, you know, if you don't weld it just right, it's not going to be straight, and that's going to cause a problem. So that's the only combination U-joint I could get. I couldn't get a cheap generic Napa one. So it was a little pricey, so hopefully this works. Not the end of the world if it doesn't, but I'm just going to put the U-joint in, and that way I can kind of attach the two drive shafts together and mark the exact distance I need. Okay, so I mentioned how the inside diameter of this pipe is slightly larger than this one, maybe a 1/16 of an inch. Just enough though that if you thread them together, there's going to be some play. It's going to wiggle. So what I've done is I've wrapped tape around it in two places, and I went around a bunch of times, and then I had to take some tape off a little bit at a time to get it so that the tape is actually the diameter, exactly the inside diameter of this pipe. That way when they slide together, it's going to be a tight fit, and it's going to center this pipe. And then I'll be able to weld it, and it should be fairly true. I'm actually going to put a little more tape on this one side here, maybe one length. See, that's too much now. Take a little bit off. That's pretty good. Okay. Got a measurement there. 3.5. Okay, so I just got to tack this in place. I've got both the yokes in the same orientation. Just going to move it 90 degrees. Well, actually, I'm going to go 180. Tack it again. Then I'll move 90 degrees. That way the welds don't move it out of alignment. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I've got it installed. The drive shaft itself is just tacked in place, but I wanted to make sure everything fit before I went ahead and actually welded it permanently. This is the clearance issue I was worried about, the kind of space between the cross of the U-joint and the nut for the yoke on the transfer case. It's, you know, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 millimeters, but it looks like there's enough clearance there. I pulled the drive shaft back, hopefully not too far, but I wanted as much movement, compression as I can get as the front suspension sort of rides up. So yes, there's a way to measure that and test it, but I may play around with that a little bit before I actually go ahead and tack this in. But the main reason I want it in place is so that we can think about things like where the master cylinder is going to go and whatnot. So now we know exactly where the drive shaft is, and we can think about clearances and positioning other stuff. So the next thing is to work on the back one. Probably not going to do that in this video. I still have to maybe find some parts. So we'll move on to some other stuff. Okay, while I'm waiting for other parts, I'm going to go ahead and start fabricating these spring perches. And this is a part that we need so we can remove the rear axle and weld these onto the axle so we can change the pinion angle of the rear differential. And I'll show you what that is. So there's the axle. This is the rear axle. And the problem is we want to straighten, if not tilt, the pinion upward towards the transfer case. So that part right there, that's kind of, it's welded to the axle and it's sandwiched in between the axle and the leaf springs, and it provides kind of a solid base that allows you to bolt the two together. So what needs to happen is the axles needs to be removed, the old one needs to be cut off, and the new one's welded on in a slightly different orientation that will pivot the angle of the axle. And that's our problem. That's pointing down. It needs to be at least horizontal, if not slightly pointing up towards the transfer case. So those are the two pieces, and then there's a little bit of waste material in the middle, but we'll get two little arches that will form the sides of the spring perch. Okay, there's the components. Now I just got to weld them together. Okay, just so you can see how they fit on the axle. Okay, there's the spring perches all finished up. Probably going to be a few weeks before we move the axle and do that job, but these are going to be ready to go. So really the last thing we need to get done is this rear drive shaft. I took an inventory of parts, ordered some stuff, and I think I have everything I need to get this done, and then we'll be able to finally put it up on blocks, get the engine going, and test it, and make sure everything runs the way it's supposed to. Okay, that's it for this video. If you want to see more videos from the Woods Farm and the 222 Scout Car project, like and subscribe. If you have any questions, leave them down below. And as always, thanks for watching.